Locadane.
Hello and welcome to Who Is Best, a show where I, Locadane, take games to give you choices and rate those choices in a tier list. Nearly 6 years ago, I kicked off this series with a tier list of Final Fantasy VII. I then proceeded to rate nearly every Final Fantasy game afterwards. I've learned a lot in 6 years, and today I'm putting that experience to work as I go through and replay and re-rate the entire Final Fantasy series, starting with Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age. In this remastered version of the international version of Final Fantasy XII, the player can choose between 12 jobs. Halfway through your playthrough, you can assign a second job, leading to a few dozen combinations that make rating this title very difficult. How I'm going to go about this is I'll not just be considering a job's effectiveness in the late and post-game, but throughout your entire playthrough. This will consider skills and abilities, weapon types, equipment, stat boosters, and access to the two most broken late-game breaker abilities, Expose and Wither. We'll need to start first with the party members though. There are 6 in total, and each has their strengths and weaknesses, as well as different synergies with different classes. Bosch has the highest strength for most of your playthrough, but Vaughn will tie with him in strength by the endgame. Aside from strength and HP, Bosch is lacking. Seeing as the bubble spell trivializes the HP stat, this means that you'll really only use him for his DPS capabilities and his wicked fast attack animations, which are some of the best in the game. Fran is a mixed bag. She has average stats aside from vitality. The random damage weapons like axes, hammers, and hand bombs use this stat in their attack calculations, so she's ideal for those. She also has a very quick polearm attack animation, so she's an ideal monk as well. Aside from that though, your options are limited here. Penelo stands as your best magic user for the first half of the game. She has the highest MP, which makes her ideal for white magic. On top of this, she has fast animations with the ninja swords, but the worst animation for guns and crossbows. Ash surpasses Penelo in magic power, but not in P, and that ultimately means she is your magic powerhouse. This is good because almost all of her attack animations are terrible, so having her cast magic will optimize her usefulness. Vaughn is all around a powerful party member. He excels in almost every class, but towards the end game, physical classes like the Knight will be the best choice. He has the best animations with great swords. The final party member, and possibly the best party member, is Balthier because his ideal attack animations with ninja swords, katanas, one-handed swords, and daggers, coupled with the highest speed stat in the game, coupled with the best class combinations in the game, which we'll get to in a moment, makes him a beast on the battlefield. Anyway, let's jump into the tier lists. Be sure to stick around to the end where I'll go over the best possible class combinations as well as recommendations for each party member. Also, while you're here, why don't you consider subscribing and becoming a member of the tier. The only class that is ultimately not worth using is the Time Battle Mage. The best thing you can say about this job is combined with better classes, its access to heavy armor and complementary spells can be useful. On top of that, the haste spell is very useful. Unfortunately, towards the end game, other classes will gain access to haste, and you don't get Hastega until right before the final boss. So there really is no redeeming factor here. Most players will simply grind for haste and Hastega motes to suit their needs and leave this job in the dust. The low tier. The Foe Breaker is the first job on the low tier. By itself, the Foe Breaker is one of the worst jobs. Combined with other jobs, it's elevated significantly though. Its greatest draws are its access to the 4 breaker skills, Genji gear, and hand bombs for long range damage. Aside from that though, the class has some issues. It needs 2 espers to unlock all 3 swiftness licenses, and axes and hammers are the worst weapon types in the game. The real clincher though is that Expose and Wither, the 2 most important breaker skills, are available to other better jobs, which means that there's not too much reason to use the Foam Breaker. Next on the low tier is the Ulan. The Ulan is a great class for the mid game. Even in the late game, its access to Holy Element weapons, which are pivotal for most end and post game baddies, keeps it useful. Also, through espers, it can access 2 breaker spells and can hit flying enemies. The issue here though is that most of the Ulan's utility is gobbled up by better jobs like the Monk or the Knight. The Knight specifically in the end game is overall a better choice. If you're looking for the best late game physical DPS combo, Ulan will fall short unfortunately, but until then it's still a very viable class. The mid-tier. First up on the mid-tier is the Black Mage. Black Mage, like the Ulan, is a fantastic starting job. But unlike the Ulan, the Black Mage doesn't taper off in usefulness in the late game. Paired with the Red Mage, the Black Mage can dish out the highest magic damage in the game with the Oil, Fire Staff, Ardor combo. Spells like Darkra and Scathe also come in handy through your playthrough as well. The reason the Black Mage land on the mid tier and not higher up is 1. Physical damage is by far the optimal choice in the late game. And 2, in order to really get your money's worth out of the Black Mage, you need to understand enemy elemental weaknesses and plan accordingly. Not to mention that the Archer's fire setup competes in damage with the Black Mage, while also providing support. Oh, and there's MP management, which can be cumbersome. Overall, there are just better and faster options for damage later in your playthrough. The final member of the mid-tier is the Mechanist. The Mechanist is a unique job as its weapon type, the gun, ignores stats and dishes out a fixed amount of damage. This makes it ideal paired with classes that lack DPS capabilities like the White Mage. On top of this, the Mechanist job gives you the Swiftness licenses while also providing the haste spell in the late game with Espers, trivializing the Time Battle Mage. If you want to optimize the Mechanist's damage, it'll require specific equipment as well as an understanding of enemy weaknesses, but it can be viable. Overall, it's a good class, but not the best. The top tier. The Monk is a solid job, both as a single DPS, support, and as a secondary class. It has access to all the battle lores and HP lores, making it a stat building machine, a bunch of useful buffs like haste and decoy, and the 2 best breaker skills, expose and wither. The Monk has access to most of the useful white magics while boasting the highest strength stat. Many think that the Bushi pairs best with the Knight, but if you're going the Katana route, I find the Monk to be the better pairing overall. Next up on the top tier is the Archer. The Archer may be one of the most versatile jobs in the game. It can be comparable in elemental damage to the Black Mage with the use of Ardor, Oil, and the Burning Bow. But slapping on the ability to use Asuna and the Remedy, Potion, and Phoenix Down lores allows the Archer to heal HP, remove all status ailments, and revive party members to full health without the use of MP. The Archer's item usage makes them one of the best supporting jobs in the game, especially late game when magic casting can be disrupted. Considering this with its high damage potential, and you have a top tier job. The White Mage is a very straightforward job, and one of the few jobs that alone is still immensely useful from the beginning of the game to the end. Obviously, this is the single best support job in the game with access to every white magic spell. Kiraja is a godsend in harder battles, as it's the best way to do a party-wide heal. It's also effective against mobs of undead. The other benefit here is how MP efficient the White Mage can be. Throw on a secondary class like Shikari with its godlike evasion using the main gouch, or the Archer or Black Mage with its fire damage, or the Knight with its impenetrable defense, or the Mechanist with its fixed damage, and you have an unstoppable support unit. The Bushi struggles in the early game until you can unlock a secondary class and boost its damage. The Katana is a unique weapon whose damage is calculated via the magic and strength stat. Bushi, paired with the Genji gloves for multiple hits and the Monk or Knight job with all the battle lores activated, has the highest damage potential in the game. That is if you take out holy element damage. Once the latter half of the Lusu mines are unlocked in the mid game, you can, very carefully, make your way there and obtain the Masamune, which is the best katana for the majority of your playthrough. Similar to the Bushi, the Shikari starts out slow, but in the late to end game, becomes an absolute beast. Not only does the Shikari's access to daggers make it an optimal pairing with the White Mage, but given a ninja sword, whose attack is based off of the attack and speed stat, and the Germinus boots, which boost speed exponentially, and you have a solid DPS. The real clincher for the Shikari is that it's all but required for the Yasmet fight. Given the Yagyu Darkblade and the Dark Robes, the Shikari Red Mage will dish out the highest damage possible. What holds this class back from the God tier is it's circumstantial. Not every situation will play to its strengths, but when it does, it plays hard. The God tier. First up on the God tier is the Red Mage. This class has the most utility in the game and possibly the most god tier pairings as well. The Red Mage early on is without doubt the best single class with all the best spells of the Black Mage and White Mage while also having mystic armor available. In the late game, the Red Mage's access to Black Robes makes it pivotal in beating Yasmet, and with the use of White Robes, can boost the Knight's Excalibur damage. Combining the Red Mage with the Archer, White Mage, Bushi, Knight, Monk, or most importantly the Shikari will produce one of the most versatile and powerful jobs in the entire game, hands down. The final member of the God tier and top of this list is the Knight. The Knight alone is the single best job in the entire game. The Knight will never be useless. In the early and mid game, it has heavy armor, high damaging weapons, and access to white magic. In the end game, with Excalibur, the Knight just becomes broken. As long as the enemies are weak to the holy element, which most enemies at this point are, this is the strongest weapon in the game. If paired with a magic class that grants mage armors and given the white robes, the Knight's damage will be mind-boggling. Given some spells or long-range weapons, and this job pretty much has no weaknesses. Now as far as best job combinations, there are some of the obvious. Shikari Red Mage is your Yasmet killer. Bushi paired with the Monk will give you high strength, the Genji gloves for multiple hits, and expose and wither. Pairing the Bushi with the Knight will remove the breaker spells but adds heavy armor. The Archer paired with the Red Mage, White Mage, or the Black Mage will create one of the most versatile jobs in the game with the ability to handle both damage and support, especially in the endgame. The Mechanist paired with the White Mage will give you a solid healer with haste and hastega that can also do consistent damage with guns. The White Mage paired with the Shikari and given the main gouch will be an invasion machine. The White Mage paired with the Foe Breaker will become a solid debuffer and healer with high defense and access to all breaker spells and hand bombs for flying enemies. An optimal team of 6 will pretty much be 2 breakers, a healer, and 3 damage dealers. Start off with your breakers, then switch to damage, healing when needed, and there is nothing that can stand up to you. But after reading through the comments of my previous tier list, I think most just want to use every available job. So here's what I believe to be the best possible pairing for each party member and every job for your playthrough. For Balthier, do the Shikari Foebreaker. For Vaughn, the Black Mage Monk. For Ashe, the Red Mage Archer. For Penelo, the White Mage Mechanist. For Fran, the Ulan Time Battle Mage. And finally for Bosch, the Knight Bushi. And that's our list. Thank you to all our Patreon members. If you would like to join the Pro tier and request your own tier list, be sure to click on the link below. I have perks and exclusive videos for my Patreon members. Also be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Hey everyone, if you like this video, be sure to check out my reviews of every PS2 RPG. Also, here is a video of the top 60 most broken party members in RPGs. See ya!